Welcome to Life Stories, where every story is a journey through love, loss, and second chances. Today's story is about a woman whose world was turned upside down when her husband walked away, leaving behind two children and a home full of memories. But sometimes what breaks us can also rebuild us, stronger, wiser, and more real. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's emotional journey. This is a story of heartbreak, healing, and the quiet power of forgiveness. Let's begin. You're watching Life Stories. The doorbell rang just as I was setting down our half-eaten plates. It was the kind of sound that doesn't belong in the quiet rhythm of a weekday afternoon, the kind that makes your heart skip, even when you're not sure why. I flinched. "Ethan, stay in the living room," I called, drying my hands quickly on a towel. "I'll get it." I crept toward the door, unsure why I suddenly felt like I had something to hide. Through the peephole, I saw her, Carol, my mother-in-law. I hadn't seen her in 6 months. She stood there smiling, her arms loaded with shopping bags, probably full of toys and cookies and everything she used to spoil the kids with. My stomach dropped. She doesn't know. My hand shook as I turned the lock. I felt like I was opening more than a door. I was opening the truth, raw and ugly, waiting to crash into her carefully preserved illusion. "Jenna, my dear," she exclaimed, arms wide for a hug. She stepped inside but stopped abruptly, her smile fading as her eyes darted across the hallway. The men's sneakers David always tossed near the door were gone. His leather jacket, once draped lazily over the coat rack, missing. Her eyes met mine again, this time confused, concerned. "Where's David?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. She already knew. I stepped aside. "Come in, Carol. Let me help you with the bags." "Grandma?" Lily's voice rang out from the hallway, followed by the quick patter of feet. Ethan wasn't far behind. "My darlings," Carol breathed, crouching to embrace them both. In that moment, I felt something tighten in my chest. Just a few months ago, moments like these were filled with joy. Now, every interaction felt like a silent negotiation between the present and what used to be. "Are you staying long, Grandma?" Ethan asked, clinging to her neck. "What did you bring us?" Lily added, peeking into the bags. Carol smiled, stroking their hair, but her eyes flicked back to me, looking for answers, looking for her son. "Kids," I said gently, "let Grandma take off her coat first. Let's go sit in the living room." We settled in, the kids giggling over their gifts, the room alive for a fleeting second. But between Carol and me, the air was thick with questions. I could feel her watching me, waiting. Finally, she spoke. "I tried calling David for weeks. His phone's always off. That's why I came." I nodded, fingers clenched in my lap. I didn't want to say it. I didn't know how. But before I could even try, Lily ran over, holding up a doll. "Grandma, look, she has shoes just like me." "It's beautiful, sweetie," I said, brushing her cheek. "Ethan," I added, "take your sister to your room for a while. Grandma and I need to talk." He hesitated, but nodded. Once the children were gone, silence settled like dust. Outside, the sun had dipped low, casting gray shadows over the room. "How long?" Carol asked, not looking at me. I swallowed. 3 months. He left for someone else." Carol closed her eyes. Her hands, resting calmly on her knees, began to tremble. "Who is she?" "Someone from work. She's younger. That's all I know. He just packed and left." Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you call me?" "I didn't know how. You always loved him so much. I thought maybe I'd just be a disappointment." "He's my son," she said slowly, "but that doesn't mean I approve of everything he does." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "How are the kids?" My voice wavered. "Ethan knows. He tries to be strong, but I hear him crying some nights. Lily keeps asking when Daddy's coming home." Carol stood and walked to the window. Her silhouette was sharp against the last rays of the setting sun. "Does he see them?" "Rarely. There's always an excuse." "And you?" She turned to me. "How are you managing?" I went back to work, took on more hours at the school, weekend tutoring too. He sends money, barely enough. She sat down heavily. "Why did he do this?" she whispered. "We raised him to be better." "Grandma," Lily burst into the room. "Will you call Daddy? Will he come now that you're here?" Carol's eyes filled with tears. "Sweetheart, Daddy's busy at work, but I'll talk to him, okay?" Lily smiled and skipped back to draw him a picture. Carol turned to me, her voice shaky. "Forgive me." "For what?" For my son, for not calling sooner, for not being here. You're not to blame, I said, barely holding myself together. You were a wonderful mother, and a wonderful mother-in-law. She sat beside me, memories heavy in the air, her teaching me to cook David's favorite pasta, helping with diapers in the early days, laughing together when we thought parenthood was the hardest it could get. I had a feeling, she said quietly. A mother always knows. I just didn't want it to be true. The clock ticked in the silence, a soft metronome of lives interrupted. What are you going to do now? She asked. I looked away. I'm going to live for the kids. What other choice is there? There's always a choice, Carol said, and you won't face this alone. And for the first time in months, I felt less alone. The next few days passed with a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in a long time. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that makes you listen harder because you know something is coming. And then it did. The doorbell rang again, just after 6 in the evening. I knew before I opened it. Carol stood beside me as I turned the knob. David. He looked thinner, paler, like someone who'd been running, not from a place, but from himself. He held 2 bags filled with toys, like some peace offering to children who no longer smiled in the same way. Hi, Mom, he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. Carol stepped aside without a word. I came into the hallway. My heart felt like it had forgotten how to beat properly. Hey, I said, nothing more. Jenna, he began, but the word died in his throat. Daddy! Lily's squeal cut the tension as she sprinted out of her room. She crashed into his legs, wrapping her arms around them with desperate joy. He scooped her up, tears glistening in his eyes. My little girl, he whispered, holding her close. Ethan appeared next, slower, quieter. He stopped a few feet away, guarded. I knew that look, the mix of longing and mistrust. David put Lily down and turned to him. Son, he said, his voice rough, I missed you. Ethan didn't move. Where were you? I had work. You're lying, Ethan replied, calm but certain. You left us for someone else. My knees went weak. Carol reached out and gently steadied me. David knelt in front of our son. You're right, he said. I made a terrible mistake. Ethan's eyes welled up. You think gifts make it better? We don't need toys. We need a dad. He burst into tears and ran back to his room, slamming the door. David started after him, but Carol stopped him. Give him time. Lily, still clinging to his leg, looked up. Daddy, is the lady nice? I stepped in quickly. Sweetheart, it's bedtime. But, no buts. We'll talk tomorrow. David gently lowered Lily and watched us walk away. When I returned to the living room, he was still standing there, arms hanging uselessly at his sides. I missed them, he said. Just them? I asked. My voice was cold, but inside I was shaking. I ruined everything, he admitted. You think? I nearly laughed, bitterly. 3 months, David. You barely called. You let your son think he wasn't worth the truth. I thought I found something real, but I didn't. It was nothing. 15 years, I said softly, and that was nothing to you? No, he said quickly. That was everything. I just didn't realize it until I lost it. Carol came back into the room. Ethan's lying down. Doesn't want to talk. David winced. You'll have to wait, she told him. Maybe a long time? Are you ready for that? Yes, he whispered, if you'll let me prove it. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because forgiveness isn't given on request. It's earned. Slowly, relentlessly, and I wasn't ready to open the door again, not fully, but I left it unlocked, just in case. David came back the next evening, this time without toys, just a soft, well-worn plush rabbit Lily had left at his apartment. She squealed when she saw it. You found Mr. Bun Bun. I told you he was safe, David smiled, crouching to hand it to her. Ethan, stayed in his room again. When I called for him to come walk with us to the park, he didn't answer at first. Only when Lily begged did we hear a shuffle from behind the door. He came, eventually, hoodie over his head, hands jammed deep in his pockets. We walked in silence, the late autumn breeze catching in the trees. Lily ran ahead to the swings, her laughter lighting the quiet. David and I walked behind her. Ethan kept close, but slightly apart. How's work? I asked, just to break the silence. Busy, David answered, then paused. I think about us all the time. I looked at him, not saying a word. You know what's hardest? I said finally. Every evening, I had to answer their questions, make up stories about why you weren't coming. Pretend you were busy or tired or far away. I watched our daughter's hope dim a little more each time. And Ethan, he didn't even ask. He just shut down. David's face twisted with guilt. His hand clenched into a fist. I'll fix it, Jenna. I swear. Don't swear, I said quietly. Just show up. From behind us, Ethan's voice broke the tension. Dad, do you remember when we flew the kite here? David blinked, clearly caught off guard. Of course. You were so excited when it finally lifted. Ethan kicked at the gravel. Can we do that again sometime? David smiled softly. Anytime you want. That night, something shifted. He began coming every day. He helped with homework, read bedtime stories, sat on the floor and colored with Lily, and little by little, Ethan started to let his guard down. One evening, when the kids were asleep, David lingered at the doorway. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know I never stopped loving you. I didn't respond, not with words, but I didn't send him away either. That was something. Weeks passed. A rhythm returned. David was different, not just trying, but really there, listening more, saying less. I noticed how he carried the weight of his choices, not defensively, but humbly. One night, Ethan asked him to stay and help with math. I overheard their quiet conversation. Dad, you're not going to leave again, right? No, David said, not unless you and Mom want me to. What about the other lady? She was a mistake, he answered gently, one I'll regret forever. Later, I called Carol. Told her everything. How's your heart? She asked. I hesitated. It says, maybe people do deserve second chances, if they really mean it. She smiled through the phone. When the heart is ready, forgiveness finds its way. And I think maybe mine is getting there, day by day. The seasons began to change, and so did we. Slowly, the pieces of our broken life started to form something new. Not perfect, not untouched, but real. Stronger, even. David never returned to his old apartment. He stayed, but more than that, he showed up. Every school morning, every dinner, every scraped knee, he became a father again, one bedtime story at a time. Ethan started smiling more. The tension in his shoulders eased. He didn't ask as many hard questions. He didn't need to. David was answering them with every small act of love. Lily glowed, her world made whole again. As for me, I found my own strength. I learned to trust again, cautiously, quietly, but it was there. Not just in David, but in myself. I had survived heartbreak, and I had built a home again. One weekend, we visited Carol and Grandpa. The warmth of the old house, the smell of pies baking in the oven, it felt like coming full circle. On the way home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder. David glanced over at me. Jenna, he said softly, can I stay tonight? I looked at him for a long moment. Just be here, I said. No promises, he replied. Only presence, one day at a time. That's all we need, I whispered, because in the end, love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. And some things, once nearly lost, become even more precious when found again. Thank you for listening to our story. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Life Stories for more powerful journeys of love, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit. New videos every week, real stories, real emotions. See you next time.